And
for the relief of the famine situation at the time, especially down in
all right, it's for famine relief for the children or the saints that are the Christians that are in Jerusalem. All right, so good. What is this giving not for? I think it's an important question. Okay, the command is not for us today, but even in their day, who were not going to be recipients of this giving? All right, it's not the Corinthian church or the Macedonian church. So now when we apply the principles to us today, what kind of giving are we talking about? Oh, man, Ann's on top of everything here. That's my wife. Yes. Okay. Wake up and get with it, everybody. You know, there's your model example right there. Exactly. We're not talking about giving to a local congregation, are we? But these principles will apply to the giving a local congregation. Certainly, it's got to be willingly, not grudgingly. It's got to be cheerfully. But these principles are largely focused towards you when you see your brother or sister or anybody in need, that you give of yourself to them. We're not talking about giving to the apply. We're talking about helping other Christians, individual basis. And that's part of our personal worship. Now, again, I say that is because 2 chapters, about 20% of the book is devoted to this subject. And that tells you how important it is. I read somewhere that there's 2,100 some verses on money in the Bible itself. God has a lot to say about money because we often have a problem with it. And you go, yeah, the problem I have is not enough of it. All right? Well, there's a lot of issues that are with money, and one of it is not understanding the blessedness of giving it away. And that's why Jesus said it's more blessed to give than to receive. Paul records that for us in Acts chapter 20. Yes?
We also see from this chapter the pattern that it's always in relief of saints, not non-Christians.
Well, when it's a collective effort, yes. Individually, we could do it to anyone, but you're right. All right. So, okay. But this wasn't even really from the church treasury, perhaps because, well, we'll talk about that later. But you make a good point. Yes?
When I'm thinking of just like when California burned.
Yes.
We sent money, I don't know the church did, but we sent money as personal, and so that's giving to people who might not.
That's right. Now, I understand the church collectively sent money to Paradise, right? And then I know individuals did. And so a lot of times you say, well, this doesn't apply to me because I give on Sunday. No, we're not talking about giving on Sunday. That's another lesson. We're talking about being the kind of people we give. There are 2 people in the world, 2 kinds. Thank you. All right? Isn't that true? There's people that are working to provide for themselves and then so they can give to others. And then there are other people that just gimme, gimme, gimme. You know, it's... Well... It seems like it, okay? Now, in a marriage, there's giver and takers, aren't they? And isn't there? So we don't want to get started on that. But so we understand that God loves a cheerful giver. And so we looked at this idea in chapter 8 and verse 10. And we'll go over this quickly. He says, I'm giving my opinion because this isn't command. But he said, you started this a year ago. Either that was last year or actually a whole year ago. So Paul wrote the letter in 1 Corinthians 16 about this command, just like the Macedonian churches, that you lay by a store on the first day of the week. So no collection be made when I come. And then when he does come, they're going to take this gift and appoint someone to travel with Paul. And they're going to take it to Jerusalem to relieve the famine-stricken Christians there, all right? He says, okay, you were the first to begin a year ago, not only to do this, but also the desire. So you were willing. You had this eagerness. So now what does Paul say in verse 11? Finish it. So here's one of the points we left off last week. It's one thing to say, oh, I'd like to help. Oh, wouldn't this be a great idea? Talk is good. But Paul's saying what? Just do it. Finish your plan. Carry through this thing. And that's why, even though there's readiness and the desire, make sure there's completion based on your ability. Now, the reason he says that, because we've already talked last week, and we'll look at it again, that some people think, well, when I get some more, then I'll give. Or when I get ahead of my bills, I will give. I don't make enough right now to give. And what is Paul saying? Completion based upon your ability. That's what you have right now. Yes.
Yeah, and that works both ways, because there are those who give so much that they actually hurt themselves. Dr. Test, for instance.
Well, that's right. They get themselves in trouble. Yeah. But even Paul said of the Macedonians, the first example, they gave out their poverty by their ability and beyond their ability. And they gave till it hurt. Now, remember, this giving here is not under obligation. This is people are excited to do this. That's how he described the Macedonians. They wanted to give. They begged for the opportunity. So if we're thinking duty, obligation, commandment, we're missing the excitement that comes along with being a giver. And it's a blessed thing once you start practicing it, okay? And so Barclay writes, I saw this, the tragedy of life so often is that we have no high impulses, but that we fail to turn them into actions. No, we think lofty things, but we fail to actually act on them. So there's where he says, and here's where we finish, that readiness is, if it's present, it's acceptable according to what you do have, not according to what you don't have. Now, that's so important because, again, a lot of times people say, well, if I had more, then I would give. And basically the honest answer is, no, you wouldn't. Because if you're not giving of what you do have now, even if it's a little more, you're probably not going to give when you got more. All right? Now, how come people don't have any to give? Huh? Well, exactly. So here is their budget, 100%. And I don't care if it's $1,000 a month or $5,000 or $10,000. We'll just say $2,000, all right? Just for illustration. So here's 50%, and here's, of course, 25, and we could break it all down. And so what people often do is they say, well, when we're figuring out a budget, we put in like our housing, right? There's a big chunk. And then there's insurance for the car and the house. Then there's auto payments. And then there's cell phone. And then there's cable TV. Oh, food. We're all out. So, Lord, I can't give because I'm all maxed out. Does that happen a lot? Now, when we're talking about giving to the church, we often make this statement. The first amount of your budget goes to the Lord. The rest is extra. He said, what about housing and food? I got to have, yeah, the Lord wants you to do it. But if you don't dedicate a sum to the Lord, you always run out. You always will run out. That's just the way it is. And it's interesting when you start prioritizing saving and giving, those two things, saving and giving, it seems like there's always enough. And then we're going to see next week, and this is hard to deal with because we're not preaching health and wealth gospel, but there is a promise. When God sees, this is his promise, when he sees that you're working with him and for him, he will give you more tools to work with. And that means more resources, more money. He said, well, that sounds like health and wealth gospel. Well, no, it's not the way the world teaches it. And we talked about that last week, but it's a promise. He was faithful in a little, he's going to be faithful in a lot. And the reason you don't have, the Lord would teach, is because you're not faithful in the little things you do have. And so I know it's challenging, but this is, when we understand the priority and how important it is that we're givers, then it becomes a priority, all right? So we saw these points so far. It's about grace, It's just God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And so when I see people in need that they can't help themselves, I'm showing what? Grace. I'm doing to them what they're not able to do for themselves because famine or unemployment or sickness, whatever it is, right? I'm showing grace. I'm motivated by God's grace for me. And it starts with giving yourself to the Lord. It's always a matter of free will. And again, now it's not about how much you have, it's how much you have in your heart. Really, isn't it? That's what it's all about, okay? So when he says that, we're going to look at just this concept because it's going to set up the end of this chapter and the beginning of the next chapter. And what I want to ask the question, and I know we'll be quick to answer, oh yeah, we're stewards. But when it comes to our possessions, are we owners or are we stewards? See, you guys were just that quick. I know, but do we live like stewards or do we live like owners? All right, that's what we have to ask ourselves. It's easy to say that because we're in Bible class. We always give the right answers. But are we owners or stewards? Now, owner, they possess it for themselves. It's theirs. A steward or a manager is someone that's been entrusted with the property of someone else, and they manage it for the master's benefit. So that would be someone like a property manager, right? You rent out the property, you collect the funds, you take care of maintenance and all those issues, and you send the proceeds to the owner and you get your cut, right? But you have to be faithful in the managing of someone else's property or else you will lose your position, okay? Yes?
Just like with God's word, we're stewards, if you will, of his word, and what we do with it is important to God.
Well, exactly.
And so that puts that woe is me if I don't do according to the abilities he's given me to further proclaim that gospel.
Well, that's right. But we're talking about now, you're exactly right, it's a similar parallel, but we're talking about possessions now. We're talking about income, homes, any kind of gifts that God has given us. Now think about Genesis 1, when he made man and woman, what did he give them right beginning, from the very beginning? Huh? I'm sorry? Well, that's true, but I'm talking about this kind of subject. Gave them what? Dominion over all the things that were created, the animals and the beast. Dominion means what? Control. Now, were they owners or are they managers? They're being stewards of God's garden and God's creation, and they're accountable to him. They didn't own it, but they were given from the very outset charge of it. Now, 1 Timothy chapter 6 says, we brought nothing into this world, and we can't take anything out, so be content with what you have. Now, I think that's interesting because he talks in later about the love of money is a root, not the root, but a root of all sorts of evil. But he says, you didn't bring anything in, and you're not going to bring anything out. What does that tell you about your possessions?
They're not yours.
You can't, yeah, they're not yours. You came in without them, they were given to you, and you leave without them, they're not yours. They'll be left to someone else. You have just temporary custody of those possessions, but yet we speak as though my car, my house, my children, my wife. Well, I can't stop there because I have no control there. No, that's all right, just joking. I shouldn't say that. That's a joke only when she's not here. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean that.
So can you expand this?
I will.
To Bob?
I will in just a second. It's a great one. Psalms 24, the earth is the Lord's and all that it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. What does that exclude? All right. And then also Deuteronomy 10, behold, the Lord your God belongs heaven and the highest earth, the earth and all that is in it. And Job said, who is given to me that I should repay him? What is under the whole heaven is mine. Now that's interesting. God says, you can't repay me for anything. Why? It's all mine anyway. And you think about it. What are you going to pay back God with? What is yours that you can give him? The only thing you give really is yourself, your entire life. Even Deuteronomy says God gives us the power to create wealth. So, well, I made it myself. No, the ability and the wisdom and the opportunity to make wealth, he says, is a gift from God itself. All right? Now, Dean asks a question that's very, very important. And so it's found in Acts chapter 5. When Ananias and Sapphira had a piece of property, they sold it, and they concocted this plan. We want to appear as we're giving the whole amount, 100% of the proceeds to the church. But actually, we're going to keep some of it back and just give them a part, and we'll lie about how much. And so when they do this, Peter calls him, why have you chosen to lie against God? And he says, while it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not under your control? This is hopefully what you're asking, right? Okay. So do you want to answer it?
I have a difficult time answering it
Okay.
entirely. There is a sense in which we are stewards, that certainly that which we have because of the goodness and the grace of God.
Yes.
While we have it, it is ours to dispose of.
That's right.
And we can choose, without fear of censure, not to give everything to this collection for the saints.
You're right.
Ananias and Sapphira would not have sinned had they sold the property and given 20% to the Lord.
Would they have sinned if they hadn't given any?
No,
There's no suggestion that was even a sin.
no,
Their sin was they lied about it.
exactly.
So the question that comes from this, was that theirs or were they stewards of it? And the answer is going to be both. Now, why would it be both?
Like Dean said, we are stewards of everything that we have, but while we have it, it's at our discretion to use it as we see fit.
All right. And so how are you going to get both together? Yes, Jennifer.
But don't property managers even keep back a certain percentage for their living?
Yeah, that's income. A laborer's worthy is higher. Right.
In the day, if you were a steward,
Right.
there would be a small portion kept back for your living.
Well, yeah, but like I say, it's income because we call it income. But I understand what you're saying. This is different. It was their property. They sold it. And Peter says, you didn't have to sell it. You chose to. And when the money was yours, $100,000, you could do anything you want with it. That's what he's saying, right? It was under your control, right?
Peter had the ability to know what had happened.
Exactly.
We don't have that.
But I'm just addressing the principle. Your money is under your control, and you're not forced to do anything with it. Were you going to say something? All right. Okay, good. Just going to want to go on. All right. Now, here's the way I've wrestled with this too. This is the way I would understand it. When we look at 2 Corinthians 8:9, what are some of the parameters of the characteristics of generous giving? It has to be done willingly, cheerfully, not by commandment or compulsion, or else don't give. Oh, isn't that what he's saying right here? And if it's not willing, don't give it. Now, on the other flip side of the coin, is God going to hold us account for all of our actions on this earth?
Absolutely.
And so he said, Lord, I could see him. You had $100,000 and you saw a pressing need. You could have helped and you chose not to. Why? It was under your control, but I want to know why. Now, will we be held accountable for those decisions? So, on one hand, it's under our control, but on the other hand, it's under our control because we're stewards. We have that authority of what God's been given us, and he wants to use it for him. So you can have it both ways. Because as a steward has 100 properties under his control, can he decide who it's rented to and all those issues? Yes. So there's both going on simultaneously, but ultimately God has gifted us and we're going to be accountable to him. Now, can you enjoy the things he gave you? Absolutely. And there's so many principles that show that.
Well, let me go back to Ananias and Sapphira. They might have chosen to say, we're going to sell the property, we're going to take the proceeds of the property, we're going to invest it so that we can generate more income with which we can share in the grace.
They could have done that.
And there is nothing wrong with that.
That's right. But just be careful, because you're right. But that's what the Pharisees kept doing. It's Corban. It's dedicated to the Lord. We can't use it to help anyone.
Well, that's true.
And actually, it's greed masked as charity. Yes, you're right. And I'm not saying you were suggesting that, but we're going to be accountable. That's all I want you to know. It's yours. God gave it to you. Now he's watching what you're going to do with it. All right? Yes.
And there's other areas that we're accountable to. We're in control of our children, our talents, our body, our money,
That's right.
our influence, our time, our soul.
If we don't take care of our children, being a giver there, we're worse than an unbeliever. So I've been blessed with it, but I have to take care of my own family. That means parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren. Yes, Dean.
I was just making, I think the point needs to be made that my decisions are frequently going to be called into question by other people who watch
Yes.
the decisions that I make. They don't know why I'm making the
Yes.
decisions that I'm making.
Now that's a really valid point to make.
And there is to Brian's point, when we were living in Alaska, more than half the time, we had someone living with us. And we displaced our girls, we moved them into a shared bedroom, and we gave somebody the ability to have a place to live. And we got to the point where it was beginning to weigh on our children. And we decided at that point, we're not going to continue to do this until our children are a little bit older. And then we may go back and start doing this again.
That's right.
But at that point, and we're not deciding that we're going to be owners exclusively.
Right.
But we have divided responsibilities, and we chose to discharge one
Right.
responsibility over another, and
Right.
not everybody understood that.
All right.
Everybody understood.
And I appreciate that. There's some priorities of your management, and it starts with family first before others. Would we agree that? You can't take care of a stranger if you let your kids starve. God will hold you accountable. So we're starting to nuance this idea of stewardship, but I just want to go back to the principle, we're stewards, not owners. Now, how you manage that money, you make a good point. And even in your house, to you, yes. I mean, you can see it a burden, but it costs you something. You can't have a guest without it cost you something. Heat, food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Especially when they're teenagers, right? So I learned that. Okay, but you make a really good point. Let's don't judge others. Oh, they should be giving more. Stop it. Look at yourself. That's the only one you're accountable for. And it's easy to do that. And that's what Paul's really trying to get us to, and that's my purpose. Say, well, I would give more if I could. No, you probably wouldn't. What are you doing? And I'm not talking about to the church. Having this heart of grace that I want to help. I create great joy in it. And the blessings really are. So does that make sense, what we're saying? Yes.
So, in the line of thinking what's taking place here, we're never ever an owner. We can only be an owner of the stewardship, right?
Did it say that last part, that we're only what?
We can never ever be an owner of anything, really. Only owner of the stewardship.
That last word?
Stewardship.
Oh, stewardship. I didn't hear it. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, that's the general principle. It's in our possession temporarily. We have ownership in that sense only. and that we're entitled to it. People can't take it. God condemned moving boundaries to steal property, stealing from others. Yes, it's yours, but in the bigger picture, it's God's gift to you to manage for him and yourself temporarily. So there's both going on. Yes, we can talk in one concept, you're an owner. But from the big picture, you're stewards. And if we remember that, it's going to help us. Yes?
You can't help but love the words of Job when God blessed him with all of his wealth and all that he had. Then he came back after God took or allowed all that to be taken from him. Job's response was, God giveth and God taketh it away. Blessed be the name of our Lord.
That's right.
He gave all due credit to God.
That's right.
And in the end, of course,
Yeah.
even more so.
Good. So in one sense, again, it is mine because it's not yours. It's my house, not your house. And we have property rights, all right? And God was esteemed those very important in the Old Testament. But in the other picture, not talking about horizontally, but vertically, we're all stewards, okay? Now, with that being said, let's look at some things that stewards, how they differ. Whoa. That disappeared. Where did it go? Isn't that amazing? All right. Oh. Man, I've never done that before. Do you mind if I fix that real quick? It's something. It's because we're in this twilight zone between the holidays. It's just, isn't that true? Yeah, see, I have no control of this. I have no control of the class. And so, all right, here we go. That didn't take long. So they're not in order, but owners ask, how much money of my money will I give to God? But stewards ask, how much of God's money should I keep for myself? Now, that's what Jennifer is saying. Even stewards keep back some of the money for themselves to make a living. See the difference, though? How much of my money will I give to God? The steward's thinking, no, this is God's money. How much should I keep for myself, my own pleasures or whatever? Is there a difference just in the attitude, how you frame the question? Now, you might get up with the same amount. You might come up with the exact same amount both ways. But the point is, it's just how you ask the question shows the difference in attitude. Owners ask, do I want this and can I afford it? Or else they should ask, do I need it? We never ask that. Some people don't ever ask, can I afford it either? They just charge it, right? But stewards ask, how will this affect my ability to advance God's purposes? Now, what I mean by that is, all right, yeah, do they make it easy today for you to buy a brand new car? When you walk in to what's the first question the salesman asks? When it comes, huh?
What color you want?
Well, yeah, when you get, even before that sometimes, I'm looking for a new car, and I want a sedan or SUV, and they say, oh, good, well, what kind of payments do you want each month? Yeah. That's the first thing they ask. They don't even worry about the cost because they will just get you some kind of payment plan that you can afford it. That's all they do is want to do. Isn't that right? Who's had that experience? So can you buy a car today, pretty much anything you want, and pay payments? And they'll be glad to shove you out the door with your new payments, $400, $500, $600 a month, right? But stewards ask, no, when I could buy a used car that's perfectly good and pay cash if I save up for it and use that $600 a month for the Lord somehow, to help my neighbor, to provide help for a missionary or send money overseas to a preacher that needs it. Could you do all those things? That's an individual thing. And so there's an opportunity cost. You know, Dave Ramsey talks about that. What do you mean by opportunity? You know what I mean by that? When you choose to spend money on one thing, the opportunity to spend it on somewhere else is gone, right? It's because you can't spend the same dollar in two places. So every time you make a decision to buy something, you remove the opportunity effectively to do something else. So stewards ask, they prioritize, it's family, church family, neighbors, and where do you come in? Well, We got to take care of ourselves, and that's a whole nother discussion. But I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here.
One of the things that Tim and I always do is if we're shopping for a car or a house or whatever, pray about it.
Yes.
And I even ask for the same the color.
Yeah, well, you should.
Well, because I need to know that
Yes.
it's okay.
Yes.
And, sometimes I feel guilty.
And let me be very careful. I'm not saying it's wrong to buy a new car, because sometimes that's the best stewardship choice because of the miles you put on it, because of maintenance. You got to have reliability. There's lots of reasons. I know Teresa was driving to Portland. Well, how many times a week? And how many miles a year do you put on your car?
The last car, I put 70,000 on it.
In 1 year? 70,000. Does she need a new car or a used car? A new car with with good gas mileage, right? Right? So don't hear me saying, oh, Jack thinks it's, no, but just do the own process in your own mind about how much you have able to pay. And everyone's different, and we're not going to judge each other, right? That's all. See, we're not going to judge each other. We're all accountable to God. The last one, owners may say, my money's my private business. And a lot of people feel that way. He says, Jack, I don't even like you talking about this because it's my business. Well, you're right. It is your business. But God's going to hold you accountable. And I'm just teaching you the principles. You decide what you're going to do. Because stewards ask, I will seek wisdom and be faithful in using the resources God has put in my charge. That's what you were saying, right? You pray about it. That's something Anna and I have to always work on as well. Do you see the difference, though? I'm trying to see. Now, when you get that, then we say, well, we want to have some integrity when it comes to our stewardship. And so remember this chart we saw? We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, so we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. It's about giving. So think about this. God gave his son. The Macedonians was our example. They were recipients of that grace, weren't they? God did for them what they could not do for themselves. And so when Paul talked to them about these needy saints in Jerusalem, they were excited to be able to do for them what they couldn't do for themselves. But meanwhile, what were the needy saints doing in Jerusalem? Praying. Why would they be praying? For two reasons. They have a great need, and what does God tell you to do when you have a great need? Pray. Now, who are they praying to? The Macedonians? No. To Paul? No. Churches at Corinth? No. They're praying to God. And God says, you pray and I'll provide. You seek me first and I'll provide your food, shelter, and clothing. I want you to see this connection. Who's the provider? God. He's the one that answers prayer. So they hear about it, and so they send dollars to the church in Macedonia, don't they? They're not sending food, because they're sending dollars so the dollars can buy food when it gets there. What did I do wrong? To Jerusalem, sorry. The Macedonians sent it to the saints in Judea. All right? They received it, and were their prayers answered? Really? How did God answer their prayers? He didn't rain manna from heaven like it happened in Israel. Remember, they prayed, they cried, and God rained manna from heaven. How did it happen?
That's how the saints took care of it, because that's what God sent the saints and told them, you need to help your neighbors, help those people that are in need.
Well, then, if God is answering their prayer through the Macedonians, is that how he works today?
Yes. Isn't that the way he's always worked?
It's my resources or his? He put them in my temporary custody, so when the need comes up, I'm ready to give to others. That's why he gave them to me in the first place. Is that fair? That's right. And so God answered their prayers, but he answered, he's the one that's responsible. He gets the glory. But here's the process, the chain of answering the prayer. So that's what you have to see, that when you see a brother in need or a sister or any kind of pressing thing, and you privately, not letting the rest know what you're doing, and you give, you could be answering their prayer, but actually God's answering their prayer through you. Are you working with God now? Yes. Are you working for God? Now, God recognizes that kind of person who's faithful in little. Says, there's someone I can use. They're good stewards. In fact, they're so faithful, I'm going to put them in charge of more. Now, that's next week's lesson. It's a promise, especially in America. I'm going to put you in charge of more, and more translates into what? Dollars. Yeah, resources, but dollars in this case. You say, really? Yes, because if he knows he can trust you, not stingingly, not grudgingly, but you're begging for the opportunity, he says, I'm going to give you more, and I'm going to give you more, and I'm going to give you more. Well, exactly. Well, and it's actually, we're going to be in chapter 9. So, does that make sense? No, we're not going to get to chapter 9 now because we're really skipping. That's okay. That's okay. Because if we get this, you know, it's so important because it's so vital. It's really the characteristic of a Christian, this part of our nature. And we could talk about, Brian asked earlier, says, are you going to talk about giving of time, giving of your abilities, giving time of your energies, giving time of your home? You know, you could talk about giving in all those aspects, right? There's lots of ways we can give. But here he's talking about giving what? Money. And it starts there. Because if you can't do that, it's very unlikely we're going to do the others. Okay? They just seem hand in hand because it's a matter of the spirit or the heart rather than the resource. So, verse 13, thank you. He says something interesting. This is not for the ease of others and for your affliction. So we'll come back, but notice those words. We're not giving for the ease of others, and we're not giving so you can have an affliction, but by way of equality. Socialism, communism. All right. At this present time, your abundance being a supply for their want, that their abundance also may become a supply for your want, that there may be equality. As it is written, he who gathers much did not have too much, and he who gathered little had no lack. That's a reference to the manna that God provided in the wilderness. They were supposed to get how much when they gathered it? A day's supply. And if they gathered too much, what would happen? Rot in their teeth. He said, you greedy people, you didn't trust God. He provided today's, he'll provide tomorrow. Stop being a hoarder. Isn't that what they did? So this text here, when it talks about equality, here's what it is. Here are Christians. And so what would it look like if I go home and I have my 3 little kids and they're hungry? And then mom says, wait till dad gets home. We'll eat when he gets home. And they're hungry. They had a long day. They had to skip lunch. And I come home and she says, here, dear. And she gives me some steak. She gives me some lobster. And you like this, huh? And finished off some cake and ice cream. And after the coffee, and the kids are just waiting. And then I ate everything and pretty much it was prepared. And the kids, Mom, what about us? And I said, oh, here, have a bone. Is there equality? Is there something wrong with that picture? Yeah. You get it? Yeah. Equality is not that we all get the same exact, but your needs are met and my needs are met. Is there equality now? Your needs are met as my needs are met. Now, will some people's needs be met over and above and beyond another? Yes, that's always the way it is in life. Jesus said you always have the poor among you. But when he's talking about equality, it's equality in this area only. Your needs are met. Can we have equality there? No one goes hungry. Everyone's needs met. We're equal there. And so that's what they did in chapter 4 and chapter 5 of Acts. They sold properties that were extra to go ahead and provide for people that had nothing. Did they become impoverished themselves? Did they sell their last home? So now they're homeless. Now, he says, it's for their affliction. No, don't do that. That's stupid. Isn't it? It's stupid to become homeless. But there was equality in when they had abundance to help those who had nothing, just to bring them up. Was it for their ease of the people that were in need? No. Would rice and beans and things be sufficient, or do you need to feed them steak? And that's what's crazy. Sometimes people get help from the church, benevolence, and we want to help, and we're sincere about it. And they take the money and they go out to eat for the restaurant. And is that being good stewards of the things that have been blessed with them, that have been blessed? And often their argument is, well, everyone else is going out, and so why shouldn't we? Whoa, 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 whoa. Everyone else has a job and they're taking care of themselves. You're not. You're asking for benevolence. You're not in the same position. But is there equality? Yes, you have food. And when you get back on your feet, you can go to a restaurant. Does that make sense? Yes. But sometimes out of love and compassion, we think everyone should eat the same. No, that's socialism and that's communism. And the Lord never promotes that. Never. Paul said, I've learned the secret of being content with having abundance and being in need. God always takes care of me. All right, that's no one has lack. That's where there's equality. No one has a lack. Doesn't mean they have an overabundance, but they don't lack. See the difference? All right, so, I like what Hodge says. Property is like manna. It will not bear hoarding. Because remember, it rotted. If you hoard things, it'll just deteriorate and you'll lose it anyway. So, interesting. So, we've just got enough time to finish this part. There's this integrity that's going to be involved. Thanks be to God who put the same earnestness on your behalf in the heart of Titus. Now, Titus sent the first letter. He came back with a report. Now, Paul's sending him back. He not only accepted our appeal, but he himself, being earnest, he has gone to you out of his own accord. He wants to go back and deliver you this second letter, okay? And he says, now when he gets there, we send him along with the brother who is famed in the things that the gospel has spread through all the churches. This is the unnamed brother. But he's famous about everyone. Who is it? People suspect it. It's Luke, Barnabas, Silas, Timothy. We don't know because Paul, guess what? Doesn't name them. Is it interesting to you that certain preachers or brethren had a reputation everyone spoke well about? Does that happen today? And that's okay, because you can't let your light, when it's shining, be hid. Everyone's going to notice it. Now, are they seeking it for their own glory? No, it just naturally comes when you're serving the Lord in an exceptional manner. I would love to know who this is. Why do you think Paul doesn't name him? 2 reasons. They already know who it is, and he's not trying to promote him and put, kind of idolatry status on him like a rock star, okay? So, not only this, he's appointed by the churches to travel with us to go where? To Jerusalem in this gracious work and being administered by us for the glory of the Lord himself and to show our readiness. He's going to send another person that they all trust, because Paul's saying we're going to be honorable stewards with integrity, because I don't want anyone saying that I'm dipping in the money or I'm using this for myself, because he's already been accused of that. As a greedy apostle, not really an apostle, just preaching for the money. So he says, we're going to be above reproach in all this. Notice what he goes on to say. Taking precaution so no one will discredit us in our administration. That's management of this generous gift. That's their collection they made from all these churches. For we have regard for what is honorable. Notice these words. Don't you love them? Can you integrate those into your life? That your stewardship of what you've been given, it's honorable. No one's going to ever discredit you. You're always taking precaution, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. Then it goes on to say, and we're finished the chapter, we have sent them with our brother whom we have tested and found diligent in many things. That's the unknown brother, right? And now even more diligent because of his great confidence in you. And it's for Titus. He is my partner and my fellow worker among you as our brethren. And they're messengers of the churches. You can count on him. And here's the best compliment you could ever make for any Christian. These men are what? A glory to Christ. Isn't that the best compliment you could ever get? Say, that man there, he's a glory to Christ. He brings him glory. Isn't that beautiful? So Paul says, that's how we're conducting this ministry. All right, this collection of funds. We'll stop right there. Next week we'll pick up. All right, thank you, thank you, thank you.